remember that. And I think that Andy had a Moog prodigy.
Moog? Moog? Yeah. Yeah, he had a Moog prodigy, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
and Vince had some Kauai, which I do not remember the model number.
But they were the kind of the one, you know, they were the kind of entry level.
Yeah.
They were about, I mean, if I remember rightly, they were about £200 or something like that.
My Yamaha CS5 was, yeah, exactly £200.
Yeah. And what was great about that time was, up to that point, if you wanted to be in a band, basically you were playing bass, you know, guitar, synth, drums, guitar, bass or drums. But then the synthesizers came into the price range of what a guitar and an amp would cost. And that was kind of revolutionary, wasn't it, in the sense it gave people like you and many others the opportunity to go into a different direction, away from the kind of conventional lineups.
Yeah, so where we met you at the Bridge House was about 20 minutes on the train, 25 minutes on the train from Basildon, and we would put our synths in suitcases and just get on the train, and that's all we needed to take to the gig.
Yeah, no amps, no drums.
No amps, we just plugged into the PA system.
Yeah, very practical.
Mm-hmm.
And then Vince left the group.
Really early on. He told us he was leaving before Speak and Spell was released.
Yeah, he left, Speak and Spell came out in like September '81, and we were on tour, and I was tour manager and sound person at the time. And and Vince decided to leave. He said he would honour his commitments for the end of the year, which was very good. But then the burden, or the privilege, whichever way you look at it, of being the main songwriter landed on your shoulders. I mean, how did that feel? What was the reaction of the remaining three members of the band when Vince said he was going to leave?
I think we were just so lucky that we were so young.
Yeah.
If that kind of thing happened today, I would probably, have a major crisis. But we didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
I think we just decided we would go into the studio as soon as we could and just carry on without him.
Which is amazing, really, considering he wrote, apart from the two instrumentals that you wrote, he wrote the whole album. The first album, Speak and Spell, and all the hits that were associated with it, like Just Can't Get Enough and New Life. I mean, and Depeche were already a successful band at that point. It wasn't like you were just starting out. You had a high-profile band. Did you feel? I mean, had you written songs before?
Yeah. Well, when I started playing guitar at 13, I started writing songs that were obviously not very good, but I did start.
Yeah.
And I think one of the greatest things that I ever did for myself was learn to play all the songs that were in the charts. From the age of 13 till the age of 18, I used to buy this magazine called Disco 45, and it had all the words to every song in the charts, and I just used to learn how to play them. And I think that just taught me how to write songs.
Yeah, and well, it did a pretty good job of teaching you, didn't it? So, of course, as you evolved and you got more experience as a band and as performers, your interest in technology kind of exponentially or linearly, I don't know, one of the two, increased. And of course, companies like Moog and all these companies exist partly because they make great instruments, but also partly because of people's gear lust and always the need to have more equipment. Can you remember how that developed? What you said you started out with the CS5. What was can you remember the next few things you got?
Well, firstly, I would like to say that Daniel was a major influence on us because obviously we had three mono synths, and that was like the limit of our experience at that time. And when we started, well, the first thing we ever did with Daniel was photographic, which we were asked to do by Steve-O for the Some Bizarre album. And I think for that we actually played live, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you played live in the studio. I think we had the ARP 2600 was doing some of the percussion sounds.
Yes.
So all the parts, all the musical parts, yeah, you played live as you played it as
yes,
as you played it live at a gig, you know.
Yeah, so
in the room together, you know.
Yeah, so before we met Daniel, we'd never seen a sequencer before, so everything was, you know, hand played. And then when after that, when we went into the studio for Speak and Spell, you know, we were exposed to Daniel's ARP 2600 and the ARP sequencer. And
I think that opened up possibilities, maybe that you know that you hadn't realised that were possible before. So what did you get next? What was your what instruments inspired you at that time that was out there?
Yeah, that was a good question. We were talking about this earlier, and so that I have a bit of a blank area for about 1982, because it was definitely at some point, you know, I think I fell into the trap of what a lot of people did. You know, I bought a DX7 and went down the digital route a bit, and kind of like didn't worry about the analog stuff so much, which was a thing that happened to a lot of people at that time.
Yeah, definitely. And you had an early PPG, didn't you?
I did. I think I had a prototype.
Yeah, it was not the PPG, it was the one before the PPG-2.
Yes.
And not the most reliable. You used it live, I remember.
We used it live. I mean, if you carried it from one room to the next, there was a good chance it wouldn't work. So taking it on tour was not the best idea.
And I have to I remember a gig at Bochum in Germany, near Düsseldorf. And if I remember rightly, Kraftwerk were rumoured to be at the gig.
Yes.
And the PPG just broke down kind of early on, and you know, I think there was a lot of switching it off and on again to get it going. When the Kraftwerk were there, and everybody was getting very humiliated.
Yes. And I remember another famous story around that time.
Yeah. We
had to do Top of the Pops in England and fly directly. Well, it must have been the next day. We had to go on Concorde because we had to get there so quickly to New York to play at the Ritz.
Oh, yeah.
And we were on at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were completely jet lagged anyway. And the PPG just did not work at all. So after we left the theatre, we were walking to our van, and this guy walked past us, and he said, "What happened to you guys? You used to be good."
Yeah, well, you did used to be good. Fortunately, you still are. But and then we all together got very into sampling. In the early, like around 83 or something like that, when sampling, and we weren't so much sampling records, which became very we were more like sampling anything.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to? Because I mean, we had some funny experiences that you might want to relay. You know.
Yes. Yeah. So I had an Emulator 1, and then Daniel went and got a synclavier, which helped a bit. But yeah, we would literally sample anything and everything that was around. So a lot of our percussion at that time came from the kitchen. And then the heavier percussion, we would go out, and then we were recording in Shoreditch, so there were lots of building sites with big slabs of metal around and fences. So we'd go take sledgehammers out and record all of that stuff. And there was one famous sample of us smashing a bit of corrugated iron fence with a sledgehammer, and then the site foreman saying, "Oi!" or something.
and that's actually on the record, I think. Yeah. You can't really hear it. Because we were working with Gareth Jones at the time. He worked on a number of Depeche albums, and he had a Stellavox, really high quality portable, like a film, standard tape recorder, and he would go out. And we would just record everything, and then put it into the synclavier and edit it and pitch it and make tunes out of it. I mean, Pipeline, the song Pipeline from Construction Time Again, is all taken from that building site in Shoreditch, I think, and sampled and pitched and sequenced, which I think for the time was actually pretty innovative, wasn't it? I mean, sampling was just starting at that time. It was before Akai samplers, before they became really accessible. So, we had some hilarious. So the synclavier, which is an amazing but ridiculous instrument, and it's a computer, obviously, digital. And I didn't know much about computers, but I immediately thought, well, if it's a computer, it's going to stay in sync the whole time. Because up to then we'd use like an MC4 or an ARP 1601 sequencer. Well, the 1601 is analog and just constantly, you just put a click down on tape and then run the click back into the clock input, and it just runs in time. It's great. And I thought the synclavier, well, it's a computer. It's going to be great. That's how wrong could I have been? And in the ensuing years, well, how much time we spent.
Anyone who started making music in the last 20, 25 years, it takes it for granted that it's fairly easy to sync stuff. And we would spend days trying to get something in sync. And I remember one famous incident where we would run stuff to SMPTE and we would move it backwards and forwards, by 10 milliseconds, and then, we'd have a big debate about, is that better than where it was? Maybe try 5 milliseconds. And this particular incident, it went on for ages and ages and ages, where we kept arguing. One person wanted it forward, one person wanted it back. And eventually we were working with Gareth, and he said, "I'm really sorry, guys. It's not having any effect."
I remember we using an oscilloscope. We had the two clicks to try and line them up visually. Anyway, and then of course you had a period of obsession with soft synths. Do you remember?
That was much later. Yeah.
That was much later. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I'm jumping around a bit, but
yes.
that was something. And because when soft synths started to be, a reality with the computer, portable, laptops used to have enough power. It was incredible to think that you could have your whole studio in a laptop. I remember you were very into the software synths for a while, getting everything that came out.
It just seemed, it was so, instant.
Yeah.
And they may not have sounded quite as good, but they were pretty good. And I think now they're even better. I think that there are some synths, soft synths out there that sound pretty much as good as hardware, I think.
They're just not as much fun to use, I think. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, but you haven't tried the synclavier Go with the knob, though.
No, I haven't tried the synclavier on the iPad with the knob yet. No, that's true. Just one thing to go back to what you were saying about the DX7 and the first wave of digital synths and how everybody kind of just abandoned analog. I think I put it down to between the launch of the DX7 and the start of acid house. Acid house was the thing that I think first got people back into the thinking, these analog synths don't sound too bad after all. But that was a golden period for, people used to just throw away amazing instruments because they just didn't want them because they were old-fashioned. They didn't stay in tune. They drifted. They didn't, you couldn't have any presets on them, and you could pick up. I mean, I was lucky enough to have got quite a few of those instruments at that time for virtually nothing.
You got a Synthy 100 for virtually nothing.
I got a Synthy 100. EMS Synthy 100 for virtually nothing. I got a System 700, Roland System 700, a Moog modular. But you've got a big collection of you started to become a real proper collector of vintage synths. What triggered that? Or gated it? I don't know if it's a trigger or a gate.
I don't know. I started obviously collecting like things just as I went along, but I don't know what year it was, but it was later in my career, really.
Right.
Like it wasn't like in 19, when everyone was ditching like the analog stuff.
Yeah.
Like you got stuff.
Yeah.
I think with the advent of like eBay and stuff,
Right.
I started just like looking and hunting for everything.
What did you have any things in particular you were looking out for at that time?
I suppose I was just like looking for like all the classics, really.
Yeah.
And it just went from there. And you mentioned the word addiction earlier. It is an addiction.
Yeah.
I have a gear addiction.
Yeah. And your name is Martin. And I mean that led to. I'm interested to know. I mean, and then that led into your, addiction, another addiction to modular, like modern modular, which you've got an incredible collection, not only of vintage synths but of contemporary, mostly Euro rack, but also 5U things as well. Do you want to talk about that addiction?
Yeah. Again, it's so easy to get addicted to Eurorack. I think I look every day to see what's coming out.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point. I mean, I'm trying to like say to myself now, you really don't need another envelope generator. You really don't need another VCA.
Yeah.
But then there's always a little twist with them.
So, how do you manage it? I mean, how do you manage your system in the sense of when you're working on something? How do you decide? Do you have so much choice? How do you decide what you're gonna start with? I
think I've realised that I reached the tipping point a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I used to say that the more equipment I have around me, the more creative I will be, because it just inspires me to do stuff. But I think now I have so much stuff that I just walk into the studio and think, where do I start?
Yeah. I think limitations are inspiration as well. I think limitations are very important.
Yeah, I think when a picture went online of my Eurorack wall, people assumed that I, take modules out and put them in a little box and then use that.
Yeah.
But the whole thing works. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. I've seen it, and it's like your eyes just, the eyes just kind of glaze over. You don't know where it really is. But modular synths, the music made by modular synths, generally is associated with kind of more abstract music, or ambient music, and now more and more people are playing like techno live. But you're working in a different way. When you're writing or recording, you're working in a much more of a structured way. Your songs are much more structured. They're not so kind of free-flowing. How do you incorporate your modular work within those song structures?
I often don't work on 5 or 6 things at once. Mm-hmm. So I'll get a basic song structure,
Yeah.
And then I usually work on, you know, 1 to maybe 2 sounds at a time that fit in the song.
So you're using the modular. You're not necessarily using the modular to start something off.
Sometimes there have been occasions,
Yeah.
where I like get some kind of beat going and some kind of atmosphere, and then just start singing along to that. So that it does happen, but that's the exception to the rule.
Because I remember, some of your demos at the beginning, we used to call Casio and foot tap. I remember the basic demos for the songs. But as time went on, your demos got more and more sophisticated. I remember there were some very specific sounds in those demos, however crude or whatever they were, that remained in the tracks, afterwards. That kind of lived on into the final mixes. I remember, especially the kind of motor sound in Stripped, which was like a rhythmic, that part, which was amazing. I'm talking of songwriting. Enjoy the Silence had a very interesting birth and maturity. It started off as something very different.
Yeah,
be interesting to know how that developed.
So originally, the demo for that was just me singing along to a basic pad, and it was really Alan and Flood who suggested that we speed it up and put a beat to it, and I was dead against it.
I remember.
Because I thought it went completely against the aesthetic of the words and the meaning behind the song. So I sulked off for a little bit.
Yeah, we were. You were in the middle of nowhere in Denmark at the time.
Yes.
In a studio called Puck.
Puck. Yes.
Yeah. And they had these kind of residential little houses around the studio, so you disappeared for a few days and sulked. So what did you think of it when you got back? They'd sped it up and they put a beat on it. What did you think about it when?
So when I came back, it was it had like a basic drum pattern and the kind of bass line, and that was all. And I still wasn't convinced.
Yeah.
But then Flood said to me, "Can you just try playing some guitar along to it?" So I played along, and then I came up with the guitar line for it.
Yeah.
And then the kind of choir part, and then it kind of started making a bit more sense to me.
Does it make sense to you now?
It does.
Okay, that's good.
And I'd like to take this moment to apologise to Alan and Flood.
I think that's a really good example of how songs, when you have a great song, it doesn't matter what format it's played in, it's still a great song. Another great example of that is Johnny Cash's version of Personal Jesus, for instance, which is obviously sounds completely different to the original, but it's absolutely, spellbinding. It's really, really fantastic. And so, how are we doing for time? Too bad. So what are you excited to see here at Moogfest?
I'm really waiting. I've been waiting till we finish this today.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go and explore. I don't know exactly yet, but I'm going to watch your speech, which is not long after this. I'm coming to see you DJ tonight.
Thank you. Well, that'd be nice. Thank you. Hope it was. You've already got a Moog 1, haven't you?
I do.
Yeah. Have you started playing with it yet?
Yes, I've had it for probably a couple of months now.
Yeah. Sounding good?
Yes. Yeah. No, I really like it, and how it's almost modular. The way you can send. You can send anything to any destination, any controller to any destination.
Yeah. And you, of course, you made an album a couple of years ago called MG. Well, yeah, which was which is a solo album. I think pretty much just done on modular. Is that right?
Pretty much, but obviously there were some poly sounds on it, so there was. I did use a few poly synths as well.
I mean, that's a really great album, and I think surprised quite a lot of people who look at you as more of a broad term pop songwriter. That you made a very kind of much more abstract kind of record. Did you? Was that something that you? How did that come about? Were you thinking I'm going to make a record like this, or did you just start recording things? How do you when you're doing things like that? How do you work in the studio? Do you just start with a sound and build it up and
well, with around that time when Depeche Mode have always recorded a lot of instrumentals, and with the advent of Dave now writing songs, there really isn't as much space on the room on the albums, unless we want to put out like 2-hour albums, or a minute, hour 30 albums, which we really don't want to do. So at the end of the project prior to MG, I had a bunch of instrumentals that I'd written that we just didn't use, and I didn't think that much about it, and I think it was, my friend Christopher Berg, who we were working with at the time, said, "Why don't you do a solo record? You should put those out." And that's how I had about 6 at the time, so I thought, that's a good idea. So I just carried on writing instrumentals when we finished the tour.
And do you, for the last, I don't know how many albums, you've been on like a 4-year cycle, really, haven't you? Of writing, recording, touring, and then a break. And in those breaks, Dave's made solo albums, and you've made solo albums. You did the album with Vince Clarke, VCMG, which is a great... And you have a love of techno, don't you? And that's a great techno album. In the morning, like when you're on a long break, do you have do you spend every day in the studio, or what's your day? What's your life like when you're in your studio life like on a break?
I do tend to go to the studio, pretty much every day, unless I've got something, on. Yeah.
And so you're always recording and
always doing something, fiddling around. But at the moment, I don't feel like I should be making a solo project. Yeah. I have like 2 daughters of, one's 2 and one's 3. So it seems like I should be spending my time with them rather than, making a solo record at this point.
I think that's a good idea. Both would be great, but priorities. It's all about priorities. It's all about priorities. Should we throw it open to the audience for any questions?
Yeah.
I'm throwing it open to the audience for any questions. Nothing? Okay. Okay, with the glasses. Hi.
Hi.
I've been a big fan for a long time. I actually, I get a class myself creatively, and I go around and I learn about your stuff. And when I wrote some of your earlier stuff, I heard some influences that really surprised me.
Can you hear?
It's very difficult to hear.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I hit a great impasse first when I write songs too. And I kind of broke out with that learning a bunch of your stuff. And something that surprised me about some of your earlier stuff was the 60s pop influence, like early 60s pop influence, like I Gore Daniel Walk Brothers, that's the Straight Fellow, that's actually the thing.
Like I said earlier, just loved music. So I used to really, and I still do, listen to absolutely everything. And I used to think that, and I probably still think, that it's it's important to know the history of music and what's happened before, and be aware of it when you're a songwriter. And I think that a lot of people make the mistake of like being into a specific genre and listening to music from that genre, and then making music in that style. Whereas I think I took in everything from like 100 years of music before we started. I listened to everything I possibly could.
Yeah. This gentleman here, I don't know if there's a roving mic, actually. That would be really helpful. We should have talked about that before. But anyway, yeah. Everyone's going to have to speak up a little bit, I'm afraid.
So, I was actually introduced to Depeche Mode later on from my girlfriend. And I actually love everything you guys have done. But I wasn't a stranger to electronic music prior. One of my favorite bands was actually Daft Punk, who cited Depeche Mode as an influence. So, who do you listen to? Do you listen to any modern electronic music? Maybe people that were influenced by you and it kind of completes the circle? Or what modern electronic artists do you tend to listen to?
I mean, I listen to a lot of electronic music. I listen to a lot of techno music. And a lot of those people often cite us as influences. To name some names, it's like I do really like Albanoto and Diamond Version, which is both Cast and Nikolai projects. And he always says he's very influenced by us. He's a big fan.
Very cool. Thank you.
Long lady with the long hair.
Hey, Mark. I was wondering if recently you discovered a song you wrote in the past that you're now paying more attention to. Are there any songs that you wrote a long time ago that now sound a little different if you see something else?
Believe it or not, I don't tend to listen to our music much. But every now and again, I might be listening to First Wave or something, and something will come on, and I think, oh, that's interesting. Or they tend to play generally the same songs, but every now and again you'll get something that's slightly more obscure that I haven't heard for a long time, and it is always interesting to hear something.
I think it's what you said is, the thing is, when you're recording an album, you hear every song thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and this is my impression. The last thing you want to do it's more a question of relief when the record's finished. Of course, there's excitement when it's released and everything to see what people think of it, but you've had enough of it by then,
Oh, it's even painful when when the master comes through and you have to listen through to it.
It's fine, it'll do, whatever.
Yeah, I can't listen to it again. Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
That reminds me, sorry, I know that people want to ask, but you should tell the story about Master and Servant and what happened with Master and Servant.
Yeah, so we were recording in Berlin, at Hansa, and we'd really gone crazy at this point of spending way longer than we ever had before on absolutely everything, recording, and then mixing had gone crazy. So I think we spent 9 days mixing Master and Servant, and we sent it off, it was finished, everybody was happy finally, and we waited, and the acetate came back, and was it at the club we noticed?
Yeah, we went to a club in Berlin to test, we went early to see what it sounded like on the club system,
and we realised that we hadn't put the snare drum in for the last 2 minutes.
But we thought it sounds all right. That'll do.
There was so much going on anyway, it was not surprising that I didn't notice that was the snare drum.
Unfortunately, people at the back, I can't really see very well, so left young man, yeah.
Martin, your last album was...
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit? Sorry.
Yes, I am foreigner. I'm from Ukraine. Sorry, guys, for my English. Your last...
Mike, great.
The theme for your last album was influenced by the presidential elections in the United States. You were kind of upset about that. Several songs were dedicated to that, and you actually used F word first time ever in the history of Depeche Mode. Tell me please, what are the subjects for next album, and what can you say about that failed song? Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, I haven't even really started thinking about topics for the next album. I'm just, even though I go to a studio every day, I'm really just like tinkering with like new equipment and learning how to use stuff. So I really don't know about that. But yeah, with the last album, it just felt even before the election in America and before Brexit happened, there was something in the air, and it was, I just felt that as a songwriter, I felt I had to address whatever this thing was that was in the air, or I didn't feel like I was doing a good job.
I think people felt that that was inspired somehow by Trump and everything, but actually it was written long before he was even a candidate, I think.
Not before he was a candidate, so the whole candidacy thing was, because that drags on for so long in America.
Yeah.
It's just about to start again.
Not as long as Brexit. We've got time for a few more questions. The lady in the grey sweater. Questions.
So you were discussing about how constraints can help you be a little bit more creative. If you had to take all of your options and consolidate them down to the most minimum setup, what would that look like?
That's a very good question, and it's something I've been, obviously thinking about recently because, at some point I will have to be creative again. I can hide behind learning pieces of gear for only so long. I don't know. Sometimes, I think it's quite a good idea to get back to real basics and just sit down with a guitar or a keyboard or a piano or just a keyboard sound and work on the melody and the lyrics. Because I think that is the basis of the song. Where you go from there can be anywhere. So I think that is probably a good idea, and to not get lost in technology.
Gentleman glasses, that black shirt or dark shirt. Jackie.
Thanks. So first, I just want to say thank you for all your music. It means a lot to me. 2 questions. One, what are the Eurorack modules you find yourself keep coming back to? And second, how do you feel about Dave's songwriting, how it's evolved as part of Depeche Mode over the last 15 years?
Eurorack. Let me see, I'm trying to picture it. I really like the Moleco Varigate 8 and there's the voltage block. I think it's just so useful. Both of those are so useful. And I I mean, I really love a lot of the noise engineering stuff, just because it's, very unique, and, you can get some really aggressive sounding stuff out of it, but then occasionally just, you get glimmers of beauty in the middle of that kind of like aggressive, kind of like digital noise. Oh, and going back to your second question, sorry. Yeah, I think that Dave's songwriting has really come on incredibly since he started in 2005, I believe. And I think he gets better with every album.
And do you work with them on the songs anyway once he presents them, or how's that relationship work in the studio when you're working on one of Dave's songs?
Yeah, we always work with a producer, so sometimes, one of my songs might end up exactly the same as it was as the demo, just maybe a few sounds changed here and there to make it a little bit better. And sometimes they're completely, warped into something completely different.
Yeah.
I remember, for instance, My Little Universe was a really good example. It sounded nothing like that as a demo, but it turned out I really loved that track. And it's the same with Dave's song, so, whenever Dave comes along with the song, we'll all work on it as a group, and, we might, change, sometimes they'll end up quite similar, sometimes we'll change it quite drastically.
Yes, it's always interesting to hear how songs evolve in the studio, and it's interesting how you've worked with some really great producers over the years. Flood, Ben Hillier, James Ford on the last record. How does it work with you and a producer? What do you think the relationship? Because obviously you're capable of making your own records. You don't necessarily need to have somebody to tell you what to do. So what is the role of the producer in a Depeche Mode recording session?
I think we need a dictator.
Yeah.
In a way, I think, maybe that as a band, we might all have kind of different ideas about where the song should go and where the record should go, and it's nice to have somebody in control, headmaster, saying, I like what you're saying there, and I like what you're saying there, maybe we'll meet here.
But it's always a question of always liking something that somebody said.
Yes. Well, they tell us they like it.
And then when you get the masters back, people say, what happened to that part that everybody said they liked so much? But obviously you're very involved in the process, right, from songwriting right through to recording, right through to the mixing. You're present the whole time. So nothing ever gets, apart from that snare drum, everything is, is under yours and the other guy's kind of control. It's not like a producer controls what you do, is it? What dictates. You say dictator, they're not really dictating what you do, they're more like dictating the situation and the politics or the...
Yeah.
Every band has, differences of opinion. That's the nature of a band, and partly what makes a band ultimately really strong is one where people are not all saying yes, everything's great all the time, but arguing and trying to find the best way. So I guess that's, but in the end, it's you, the band, who are in control of what goes out, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we obviously, I don't think we've ever had a situation where we've decided to work with a producer and then we haven't enjoyed the process and decided to, scrap the project and start again with somebody else. That's never happened.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question. Okay, that the person you're pointing at.
I'm curious about your relationship between guitar and...
Hang on a second, they're just going to ring your mic.
Hi. I'm curious about the relationship between guitar and keyboards in your songwriting. Do you write something in guitar and then learn it on keyboards, vice versa, or do they stay separate? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think each song was different, and in the early days, I think I used to write songs more on guitar, and now, you know, I might sometimes sit at a piano or a keyboard, or sometimes I just, I think we mentioned this earlier, like Welcome to My World, for instance, if anyone knows that one, was, yeah, started out with just some kind of like loop I got going on a modular system, and yeah, that kind of like led up to the first chorus. So it really depends. Yeah, every song can start differently. But one thing that I will say, which I think is going to be slightly sacrilegious here, when we play live, I really enjoy playing the guitar more than playing keyboards. I just feel much more of a connection with the audience. You know, I can be right at the front and you know, just see, you look into people's eyes, and when I'm playing up behind the keyboards, I just feel completely disconnected. And you know, I find that important for personally for me playing live.
I mean, I think because you're playing to such huge audiences these days, it must be hard to, I mean, you're playing to 60, 70,000 people in the stadium. Do you sense, what kind of sense do you have of the audience being there? Or, I mean, can you feel a communication coming back to you? I mean, you're talking about you putting out something with the guitar. Do you feel it coming back, or is it so distant and far away that...
No, I think that I honestly believe that we have one of the best audiences in the world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if we're playing in front of, you know, if we do a small show, like we occasionally do before we start a tour, a small club in front of 500 people or whatever, or we're playing in front of 70,000 people. You know, there's this amazing feeling of togetherness. And, you know, I actually said to our manager Jonathan once on the last tour, and when I came off stage, that got me through it, because before I went on I was actually feeling really not very well, feeling sick, and I came off and I said I didn't even notice it. Well, the moment I got up there, you know, I didn't even feel that I was sick anymore.
I mean, you have an amazing following, which, you know, a loyal, more than loyal following, you know, and from my point of view, as somebody who's worked with you for so long, to see that audience grow has been really gratifying. So for you guys, it must be incredible, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a good place to call a halt. Thank you. I just, one thing I want to say before we finish, I've known Martin, worked with Martin and been friends of mine for nearly 40 years, and I've learned stuff today that I didn't know, so I'm really happy to have the opportunity to do that. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Daniel. We would not be here as a band without Daniel Miller. You know, we were being offered large sums of money by major record labels, and we chose Mute because we were huge fans of Mute, and because Mute was an electronic label, and because we felt a trust in Daniel all those years ago. And believe me, A Broken Frame would not have been released by a major label.
Thank you. So, well, thank you, Martin. That was a
thank you.
Great talk. Now I'd like to welcome on stage the CEO of Moog Music, Mike Adams, who's going to take over.
Hello, Martin. As many of you know, have been longtime participants here at Moogfest. Every year we give the Moog Innovation Award to an artist that has exemplified the innovative spirit of our founder, Dr. Robert Moog. This year's recipient is obviously Martin Gore, whose contributions to music and pioneering work with Depeche Mode has influenced countless audience members, inspired many, many people, including other visionaries such as Trent Reznor and Johnny Cash. And we couldn't be more honored to share this award with you. Martin and Depeche Mode's the electronic compositions, the lyrics you have written have brought out the most raw emotions in people in your audiences that you just mentioned around the world. So I'm very pleased on behalf of the employee owners of Moog Music and our founder, Dr. Robert Moog, and all the Moog Music people and the Moogfest fans that are here today, to present you with the 2019 Moog Innovation Award to Martin Gore.
Thank you. Thank you.
More gear. So this is our matriarch that we were just launching here at the show. Martin, we couldn't get him a Moog 1 because he's got the first one that we ever built, but we knew we were safe with this because we just started building it today. So we knew we could count on giving you this without you beating us to the punch. So I hope you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. Maybe this will be the piece of gear I've been looking for to write all those songs.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and you really did not need to give me anything. This is such an honor. You know, it's incredible. The electronic music scene and the music scene in general would not be the same today without Robert Moog's work. It would be a very different scene. So I'm very honoured to accept this innovation award. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you. Martin Gore, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.